I'm Alex Lindley. I'm the managing editor at SEMrush, and I'm happy to be here talking about this today. What I want to talk about is what's happened and what's happening to search as we know it. And I think anybody who's been paying attention knows that a lot has happened in terms of AI search. Basically, for decades now, search meant one thing. You typed a query and you got 10 blue links, right? And your job was really simple. You find a way to rank in those links. The higher, the better, right? And that resulted in traffic, and that resulted in all those lovely business metrics that we loved, right? That was the model. But that model is breaking, or maybe it's fair to say that it is broken to some degree, right? And what's replaced it and is replacing it is changing how visibility, influence, and even revenue attribution work across teams. So I'm going to walk you through what's happened, where we're headed, and how my team at SEMrush tripled our share of voice in this new AI-driven world, this new AI search landscape in 1 month. All right, so let's get into it. Okay, so most people noticed the first crack in that model I referenced when Google introduced AI-generated summaries called AI overviews, right? They tested these in mid 2023 and rolled them out for all users in May of 2024. And that link broke. Suddenly, the answer wasn't a list of pages anymore. It was at the very top of the search engine results page, the search. It was one synthesized answer built from multiple sources, right? And if the user got their answer there, well, then they often never clicked anything. So right then and there, the basic contract of search, rank, get traffic, started to weaken. Google introduced its fully AI-powered search engine AI mode to some users in March of 25 and had it rolled out in nearly 200 countries by that summer. So whole SERPs were suddenly powered by AI, complete with synthesized answers that gave many users everything they needed right there. There was no need to click any links, blue or otherwise. So let's look at what actually changed. The key shift is this. Search engines and AI systems synthesize information now. They don't need 10 answers to give us options anymore. They need a handful of authoritative sources they can trust in synthesizing one single unified answer. So the goal isn't just ranking like it used to be. The goal is now becoming one of the sources AI pulls from when it builds an answer. And of course, that's a completely different optimization problem than we're used to in traditional search engine optimization. So if you zoom out, the model changed. The old world, you had 10 blue links, traffic was the main KPI, and ranking meant success, right? Generally. And in the new world, you have AI answers dominating all the time, a zero click behavior that's completely normal and more normal every day. And discovery is happening across multiple surfaces, not just in one google.com window. So when you look at that, it's not that SEO died. SEO didn't die. It just escaped the box it was in, the rankings box, and has become something else. So one of the biggest misconceptions right now is that AI answers are built purely for traditional search index. And of course, for SEOs, we want that to be true. We're used to that, but that's really not the case. AI now synthesizing those answers pulls from far outside of your website. So that's going to be things like Reddit discussions, developer forums, support documentation, YouTube, review sites, social conversations, and yes, your website too, but that is now just one source among many. And that leads to a big organizational change. Search used to be owned by the SEO team, but now it's influenced by product teams, support teams, communities, social, PR, content, influencers, because every one of those teams creates signals that AI can and wants to use. So visibility becomes something closer to a company-wide system, not a single marketing function. But when those teams that I just referenced, when they work well together, they start to build what we think of as a visibility stack, right? So that is when crawlable content, topical authority, structured clarity, and brand mentions and citations come together to build entity trust. That entity is you, your business, your website. And the important thing to remember here is that these signals reinforce each other. Right. So AI systems are looking for consistency across the many sources that they pull from, right? That's why all these teams are now involved. In other words, we're tricking the robots into talking about us in a certain, and let's be real, favorable way. And it's a team effort, not just among your small team, but your team with other teams across an entire company, across an entire organization. So when we think about building an AI visibility strategy, which we all should be thinking about, we can break it down into 5 basic stages. So number one, research. We're understanding how customers actually talk about problems that are relevant to solution. our service, our product. Then architecture. We structure our site and our brand constellation of locations across the internet around those mental models we identified in stage one. Then we have content. We have to fill in this framework with content. And that's where multiple teams are going to begin to contribute not only expertise, but consistency, right? And that leads to alignment to make sure continually that the organization reinforces this structure that we've identified across systems, across websites, from Reddit to our own website and everywhere in between. We have to be reinforcing the structure we've built. And finally, the result, what we're ultimately, hopefully rewarded with by AI platforms is visibility, stage five. That's a lot of work. But at the tactical level, most of that falls into four buckets. We have topic selection, content creation, technical enablement, and measurement. And these are, of course, going to feel really similar to anyone who's done work with SEO before, but the emphasis has shifted here. So let's look at each of these tactical buckets in a little bit more depth. Number one, we have topic selection. So this is where we're talking about what to talk about, right? So what we're looking for here in the age of AI search is fewer but deeper pieces, right? So instead of publishing hundreds of shallow pages driven by, hey, this is a nice looking keyword with a little bit of volume or whatever, it's not that anymore. It's deep, deep, deep content pieces with absolute insight, adding something new, where we can add something new. So where can we leverage our expertise? And the goal is cluster dominance. And by that, I mean this broad topic is what we want to talk about, and we need to be able to dominate that conversation. And it's asking a really, really critical question of your team. Can we do that? Do we have the resources to do that? Because you want to send a very clear signal that this brand, our brand, is an authority on this topic. If you can't say that about a topic you're selecting in this stage, then it's probably not a good topic to focus on, or something needs to change. At least to content creation. Once you've selected your topics, you have to actually create the content to, talk about them. So content here has also changed in the age of AI search. AI systems reward content that has information gain. Now, this is a hotly debated term. When I say gain means, does this content add something new? So that can look like original data, insights, structured answers, clear summaries, and some very similar, so on and so forth, right? Now, information gain is a big part of it. And the reason why is AI systems are doing similar to what Google and other search engines have had to do for a long time. They're pulling from a huge place, the internet, right? It's enormous. We have to give them a reason to include us in that conversation. The sea of sameness content that the people are so used to creating that we seem to have trouble letting go of, that's not going to work anymore. It doesn't work anymore. Similarly, fluff, clearing your throat in a 1,000-word guide to whatever topic, or clearing your throat for 150 to 1,000 words before you actually get to the value, that's basically invisible to AI. What it wants is content that is going to enable it to synthesize the best possible answer, a whole constellation of prompts and queries that users might use. Keep in mind, these AI systems are really similar to search engines in that they have a vested interest in answering their users' queries very, very well. They're using our content to do that, and therein is our opportunity. We create content that they want, that enables them to do that, but also positions us favorably. After content, we get to technical enablement. This is the technical layer with things like schema, clean internal linking, entity consistency. Basically, this is the part where you make sure nothing is getting in the way of those excellent topics and the content you've created around them. Small technical issues on your site can reduce your visibility or completely hamstring it, depending. So, you want to focus in on this, make sure you've got everything dialed in. And a lot of this stuff is really similar to traditional SEO. It's just basically not getting in the way of this content doing its work. So when I say entity consistency, for example, that can be as simple as really getting the spelling of your brand and capitalization of your brand name right every single time, not confusing anything, all the way to how do we talk about ourselves as an entity, right? And then internal links from one page to another on your website, very traditional SEO consideration, but something to really pay attention to here because, like search engines, AI see those links. They understand them as a connection, right, between these pages. And this is how we build our clusters of content, right? And then, of course, your schema should be really dialed in to give extra information about your content. What format is it? All of that nice metadata. All right, then we get into measurement. Measurement is probably where the biggest change happens or has happened. right? Because traffic alone no longer tells the whole story. So now we're looking at things like AI visibility generally, branded search growth, assisted conversions, and many others. Three examples right off the bat. Basically, the signal of influence, what you want to measure, is moving way earlier in the funnel, and that makes it harder to spot, right? So measurement has become this big problem in AI search, and it's one that is still being solved. But let's drill down just a little bit deeper on measurement really quick. So what do we measure now? There are many things you could choose, right? I do not recommend choosing your traditional metrics. Instead, I would pick these three specific signals. First, brand visibility. So how often your brand appears in AI generated responses. Second is share of voice within a topic area in those responses compared to your competitors. That's important. And third, sentiment. When you are mentioned, are those mentions positive, neutral, and hopefully not, but possibly negative? That you want to be measuring that as well. Next, I want to, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I want to give an example from our own team at SEMrush, how we put all this into practice. And this is where I mentioned we tripled our AI share of voice in a month. So let me set the stage. Basically, we, of course, launched AI visibility tools at SEMrush, right? And right after launch, the organic team did something really simple. We asked ChatGPT about AI monitoring tools, and the result was pretty humbling. ChatGPT listed a bunch of our competitors, but didn't mention SEMrush at all, which was, of course, disappointing, but also really confusing because LLMs were citing our blog content hundreds and thousands of times, right? So why couldn't we get noticed for our AI monitoring tools, which were, I'm a bit biased, but the best, right? And new and amazing. We realized something really important. Citations elsewhere didn't equal influence, and traffic, which we had plenty of, didn't equal positioning, right? For this very important part of our business. So we realized we were being used without being chosen as the answer. So that led us to try to, of course, fix this problem. And in doing so, we focused on two key metrics. Visibility. So are we mentioned for buying intent prompts? And share of voice, right? When we're mentioned, how prominent are we in the answer? Okay. And we realized while we were setting all this up, setting up what were our efforts going to be and how were we going to try to fix this, we gained an insight in that we needed to track bottom funnel prompts. So this stuff, very top funnel, wasn't going to work. Instead, we went for example, best enterprise AI visibility platform or top LLM optimization tools, not AI tools or what is AI search or anything like that. Reason why, of course, is because those prompts are answered very clearly and directly by existing knowledge. There's nothing special we can really add there, right? That is part of what we've had to accept, and I'll get a little bit more into that later. But okay, so let's go. So we set our baseline first. So our baseline, our starting point looked like this. For the prompts that we selected, we had about 13% AI share of voice and 40% non-brand visibility. And we put a focused effort in over 30 days. I'm going to get into the nuts and bolts of that in a minute, but we put in that effort in over 30 days and we moved our AI share of voice to 32%. That was roughly a three times increase and 50% for non-brand visibility. So those were the results. And so let's get into how we did it. All right. So this is the approach we use. You could still the playbook we used was surprisingly straightforward, considering how new and complicated this all felt. So first we handpicked 20 to 50 target prompts. We set up daily measurement, okay, and then we updated our existing content to include the prompts that we chose and direct reflective answers to them. And I want to just give a little more detail on this before I move on to the next. That in many cases literally meant putting the words of the prompts that we chose into existing content and then answering them. So a really low-hanging fruit example, and not by any means the only way to do this, but one easy way to visualize that is like an FAQ, right? The prompt itself was the question, and then we had a very direct and reflective answer to that question. Those were the types of micro optimizations we were making across our considerably large bank of content, right? Okay, so then next we looked outside our domain for opportunities to influence the conversation about us, about our tools, which AI would consume and be influenced by theoretically, right? And then we made sure all of our content that we did publish and revamp or whatever during that time was fresh, citable, and optimized for AI consumption. Now we could probably spend a lot of time on what exactly that means. But basically, it was fact-based, verifiable. And I'm sorry if you can hear my dog in the background who wants to be included here. Fact-based, verifiable claims, no fluff, list style, extractable structure, all that natural language processing information writing that we hear a lot about. We implemented all of that in our content, and it was a pretty big movement for our editorial team. Okay, so that was the five-stage approach. And while we were doing this, our biggest strategic breakthrough wasn't a single tactic that worked for us or anything like that. It was a single realization. The domain, the SEMrush domain, the one we were so proud of, that we loved so much, that we had worked on for so long, wasn't enough on its own anymore. The strength of that domain, the things we could do directly on that domain were no longer enough. So we had to shift. And I'll say that was hard for us, right? It was kind of personal. But we had to shift from optimized pages to optimize for presence across the web, right? And this really, it amounted to a shift in worldview. And it was not easy, but it worked. Okay, and then what surprised us during this process? A few things. First, results showed up really quickly, sometimes in days. Second, citations changed frequently. 60% were changing monthly. So backlog culture, waiting and waiting to get things out the door and shipped, didn't work. And third, influence that mattered to us didn't always show up in Google Analytics. So what this means for teams, a few minds, I would expect some top funnel traffic decline. It's probably already happened and it will probably continue to happen. But also stop fighting the reality of zero-click search. Again, this is happening. This is part of it's by design in those AI synthesized answers. The key is learning how to operate within this new reality, not from happening. We're not going to stop it. And then educate leadership early about the new metrics you've chosen. The ones I've mentioned here are great candidates, but the ones that matter to your brand in AI search, because even if they're very, very smart, very sharp leaders who are really, really entrenched in all this, they may miss it. They may not totally understand how this all connects. So it's our job to educate up and then build workflows that allow for rapid response. AI shifts a lot. AI search shifts faster than anything I've seen in my career. We need workflows that can get things out the door to capitalize on opportunities. And finally, I would not DIY LLM tracking infrastructure. It's there's a lot I could say here, but basically, it's a distraction. It's not a flex. As cool as it could be, it's definitely going to take away from your ability to focus where things really matter. All right, now let's go looking ahead. Right, so the blue link, it's not gone. It's still there. Do a Google search right now. It's there. It's just not the center of gravity anymore. Right, search is more conversational, contextual, and compressed every day. So are going to demonstrate expertise. They're going to produce original insights. They're going to build topical authority slowly but surely, and they're going to operate a little bit like media companies, right?